Podcast. This is Sunshine. How are you? I'm so glad to be here. I am really glad to be here. Well, you may not know this, but not only do I have a podcast, which I've been doing this, I think I've been pretty good. I think I've been doing this every week for the last couple of weeks, but I normally do a weekly radio show too called The Witchel Hour. And that's been on hiatus for the last 2 weeks, and I'm really missing it. Yeah, I'm really missing it. But we are back again this Friday, so excited. I record those live as well. And yeah, we do the podcast live on YouTube. I don't know that anybody ever watches them live, and then we upload them to all the podcasting platforms. But yeah, I just find it easier. I guess I could do all the polish and professional stuff and all that kind of great stuff. But I'm a big fan of showing just life how it is. So we do this live, and yeah, today we're talking about life is how it is on today's podcast. Man, the Sober Witch life. It's an interesting week. It is really an interesting week this week. It's always a strange one for me because it bookmarks my two birthdays. And you see, yesterday, so I'm recording this on October 6th. So yesterday was October 5th, and that's my belly button birthday. And for those of you that are not aware, the belly button birthday is the literal day that you are born into this world, right? That you kind of grace the world with your, beautiful life and presence. And so October 5th is my belly button birthday. It's also the day that 6 years ago I hit my rock bottom. Yeah. And October 9th, which is just a couple of days from today, is the day I stepped into recovery. So every year since, I find myself in this like deep reflection during these 2 days. I look at how far I've come and I remember these moments that kind of changed everything. And Facebook makes it really hard to not do this. So does Google Photos, right? And I would assume maybe iPhone has the same, right? It shows you these memories. And so yesterday I was looking through old photos, and it wasn't just from 6 years ago or anything like that. I was actually looking through photos from, I think it would have been 2016. I took a trip down the Pacific Highway, in California with my partner at the time, Keith. It was a year after I had separated from my ex husband. So in 2015, the summer of 2015, I separated from my ex husband. And it was really hard to come to that place. Things weren't really good. I was in an emotionally abusive marriage, and we spent a whole year trying to work on the marriage. We were in couples therapy, and finally, June of 2015, I was done. I was done. There was a very drastic thing that left to that final. I was just done, and I asked him to move out at the end of June 2015. And so I waited almost a whole year before I decided to date. And at the end of, and I think I know the exact date. It was May 20th of 2016 that I'd met Keith. And so I had already planned for my birthday that year, 2016, a trip down the Pacific coast. I was going to go by myself originally. So I had everything planned. And the only thing that I really had to do, only thing, was, we had to buy him an extra airline ticket for him to come with me. So he did. And we looked happy in those pictures. We looked like, we were in love and having a good time. And at least at that time, that's what I thought. And I was thinking today how ironic it was that the man who taught me truly like what it felt like to be loved, right? He really did. He really, really loved me. He taught me what it was like to be loved and to be safe in a relationship for the first time, right? Especially after an emotionally abusive marriage. also stood with me when I fell into the deepest despair of my life. He was with me when I hit my rock bottom. So it was this really interesting kind of reflection this weekend as I thought about, you know, my addiction and my recovery. Because 2019, I was still with him. Yeah. And we were on vacation for my birthday again. I hated myself so much at that time that I let this darkness spill out in ways that hurt us both because he loved me and I loved him, right? But the reality was neither of us really loved ourselves. Yeah. The shame of that day, that time, is something that I still carry, not as a punishment, right? Like I don't carry it, it doesn't weigh on me, so to speak, but I remember that shame. I remember it because I understand how far I've come since then. I was showing those photos of that trip to Costa Rica to Dan, to my current partner. And, even he commented on that emptiness and that hurt and that pain in my eyes. I was pretending to be happy, pretending to be okay, pretending like I knew what success was. The truth was, I was drowning. We had spent so much time then, as well as in our entire relationship, drinking and using. Mostly drinking, let's be real. I mean, we smoked pot, but we drank a lot, a lot, you know. Dan and I have had this conversation that he never drank in the morning, but I did. Yeah. The latter part of my drinking career, it was not uncommon for me to start my weekends, Saturday and Sundays. I got up early, I'd get up at 8 o'clock, but I would start my mornings with Baileys and butter shots in my coffee. Mm-hmm. That night, my rock bottom, my 40th birthday, is one I will never forget. What I did, I'm never going to forget, but, I was sitting there and I was thinking about how I was alone that night, later in that evening. We had this beautiful room, you know. I bought the fanciest room at this resort because it was my 40th birthday. And it had this really big, fancy bathtub. And I was just sitting in that bathtub, no water in it, fully clothed, crying on the phone with my friend back home. I kicked him out. I had no idea when he went, where he went. And I was still drinking. I was still sitting there just numbing and crying and drinking. And you would think after all of this that had happened that would have been enough, right? Like after I had done the most shameful act that I had ever done in my entire life to someone. Okay. My spirit's reminding me. I'm like, most shameful. I'm like, yeah, true statement. And I guess I have done some pretty gnarly stuff. That was pretty bad. I guess I've done a handful of gnarly things, while drinking. But that one was really bad, right? That one was really horrific. But you think it would have been enough, but it wasn't. The two of us were this like perfect storm together. Even after I found him and we tried to talk, we continued to drink. The reality is not only did we drink, we found coke, we were doing cocaine, we'd found a bunch of pot, we were smoking a bunch of pot, drinking. We just kept running and numbing and just acting like a bunch of idiots. Yeah. On the trip home, I can remember sitting in the airport with one last drink in front of me, just crying, tears in my eyes, begging him not to leave me. I was terrified of being alone. I was terrified of being alone. But what I was really afraid of in that moment, and I've come to realize, I was afraid of having to face everything that I had done. I was afraid that I would do it again. I never wanted to feel like that again. Not just for what I'd done to him, but for what I'd really done to myself. I'd planned this absolutely beautiful, amazing vacation and trip for myself and completely destroyed it. In the beginning of recovery, everything felt incredibly raw. I cried constantly. My body was wrecked. I couldn't even tell you how long it kept me, took me to like come down from just that whole week of just physical abuse of my body between the alcohol, the pot, and the cocaine. I felt like I was caught in this rip current of waves just continuing to crash over me over and over again. And every time I would think that I had my footing, another wave would just keep pulling me over. And that chaos lasted for months. It wasn't until I stepped back into my magic that things really started to change. And it wasn't just about admitting that I was like powerless, right? That first step that AA introduces, I really don't think that that's what it was. It wasn't this powerless. It was realizing that surrendering to this connection to the divine, surrendering to my magic could be powerful. The power dynamic shifts with that. I wasn't powerless anymore. I was choosing to surrender. I was taking my power back by letting go. I like to think about the river metaphor that I think most folks in recovery have heard, that you can grab onto a rock and fight the current with all of your strength, or you can let go and allow the river to carry you. It takes more power to let go and to trust than it does to hold on. Letting go is an act of magic. As I surrendered, different parts of me started to come alive. First, it was the psychic, that part of me that reconnected with the divine. Through the cards, through the intuition, through seeing spirit, hearing spirit. Then the healer, who learned to listen to her body, who learned to understand that the sound of the birds can heal you, that color can heal you, that music can heal you. Then it was my inner child, the woman inside of me, the witch, the divine feminine, the part of me that was reborn through every time that I surrendered, every time I allowed the change and the shift, every time that I allowed fear to lead. Eventually, the work became service. The psychic medium came through, the Reiki master came through, the teacher, the guide, the high priestess. And I look back now and I feel humbled for all of the souls that I've had the honor to sit with, to sit across a table from, across a screen, across a circle from. And none of it, not a single one of these opportunities would have happened if it was not for that unbelievably horrific day in Costa Rica on October 5th, 2019. Every year, I honor that part of myself who reached out for help, and I remember her. And I remember the ones that didn't make it. There have been a lot of moments of synchronicity and divine intervention over these last 6 years, and it's been hard to count them, right? How the book came about, all of the different opportunities and the connections, like the recovery community organizations, the different teaching opportunities, the different events, the people I've met, meeting Dan, the friends that have come into my life, the fact that I'm still here. It's all proof that I've been walking my soul's path. If you'd asked me 6 years ago where I thought I would be right now, I never could have imagined this life. The feeling, maybe, the peace, the gratitude, but not this form. Nothing about this could have been scripted. I've learned that when we begin to walk in alignment with our truth, the universe moves mountains to meet us. Every step I've taken towards healing has been met with grace, even when it didn't look like it at the time. One of the witch's promises that has guided me the most over the course of this time is we promise to prioritize serenity and peace in our hearts, minds, and bodies. And when presented with a choice, we will always choose the one that is aligned with peace and serenity. My second year of recovery, I spent an entire year creating a piece of art that spelled out the word peace. 5 canvases, each crafted with intention, hanging on my living room wall right now. It became a sacred symbol of what I was working towards. I'd lived my life in chaos as a child, as an adult, as an addict, and once I had prided myself that I could thrive in it. But peace was what I truly wanted. And now, 6 years later, peace is what I have. It didn't arrive in a single moment, though. It's not like it came down in a divine light beam. It came slowly through boundaries, through saying no, through releasing what was toxic, through choosing calm over crisis again and again and again. Peace for me is the truest proof of magic. From the frequency of acceptance, the teaching I carry most is transmuting judgment into curiosity. I learned it during a firewalk ceremony a couple of years ago. As I crossed the coals, I set the intention to transform judgment into curiosity, both towards myself and others. The ritual has stayed with me ever since, and now whenever judgment arises, I pause, I breathe, and I ask, what is it here to teach me? When I feel judged by others, I remind myself that curiosity can dissolve fear. And when I find myself judging someone else, try to see them through a lens of wonder instead of criticism. It's such a simple and subtle shift, but it's one that's changed everything about how I live and love. If you're standing where I once stood on that edge of surrender, terrified to begin, I ask you to please hear this. Find someone's hand to hold. You don't have to do this alone. You really don't. I know it feels impossible, but it is not. Surrendering doesn't mean giving up. It means giving yourself a chance to live. You're not broken. You are sacred. You're capable of miracles. The version of me that crawled out of that bathtub 6 years ago could not have imagined this life. And yet, here I am, breathing, creating, loving, healing, and you can be too. I promise you. This Thursday, I celebrate 6 years sober. In numerology, 6 is the number of love, care, sacred responsibility. Actually, this might even be posting on Friday, so it might be a day after. It represents the nurturer, the healer, the one that builds family and community. And that shift feels fitting because this week I'm also taking the next step in my service. I'm incorporating the Sovereign Phoenix, a religious nonprofit built for witches in recovery, a sacred space for healing, magic, and belonging. 6 years ago, I was lost in shame. Today, I'm building something that's going to outlive me. This is the magic of recovery. This is what happens when we stop fighting the river and finally let us carry it home. Let it carry us home. What a beautiful full circle moment. What a beautiful week of reflection, gratitude, and rebirth. Love and magic and recovery, my dear friends. Much love from me to all of you. Until next